Hi, my name is Sharon Thomas, and I would like to just explain to you my lesson for the story The Land by Mildred D. Now, since I would be the lead teacher, I would actually have students, I would actually read to the students probably for about 20 to 30 minutes every day, the story of the land. And the story is about a boy who grew up in a time where during the slave period. He was a son of a prosperous landowner, and he is a former slave. His name is Paul Edward Logan, and he is unlike the other boys that he grew up with. His father was white, and he did acknowledge him as his own and raised him openly. And sometimes the people around him did not believe that was the way his father should have brought him up. But as he grew older, he grew into a man, and he learned that life for someone like him was not easy. Black people distrusted him because he looks white, and white people discriminated against him because he was black, and once they learned of his black heritage. Even within his own family, he faced betrayal, and so at the age of 14, he decided to move away and go off and live on his own. And so his dream, once he left home, was for him to actually go off into the world and have his own land, a land that was better than his father's, and he wanted to make that his own. So what I would have students do is, after we read as a class together for about half an hour every day, depending on how long that took us, once the story actually came to a close, I would have students, and this is a 5th grade classroom, and I'm expecting my students to be at least at the proficient level. And so what I would have students do is I would actually create a chart comparing two of the students. Create a chart that would compare two of the characters from the book. So for my teacher input, I would actually go over what it means to compare and contrast. So, for example, the two characters in the story that I would choose will be Paul Logan as well as Mitchell Thomas. Now, I didn't explain who Mitchell Thomas was, but he was actually Paul Logan's arch enemy growing up. And Mitchell disliked him because he was treated better. His father loved him, whereas his own father beat him and didn't take very good care of him. And so once they got older, they came to an understanding that they had a lot more similarities than they did differences. And so then they became best friends. Okay, and so as the activity would go on, I would pass out the paper, and they would already have the chart where it would have a place where they could choose any two characters in the book and they could compare. But like I said, I would be doing Mitchell Thomas and Paul Edward Logan. And so for the differences, I would have Mitchell's father was a slave and a sharecropper. So once slavery ended, his father became a sharecropper. And then Paul Edward Logan's father was a white man, and he owned slaves. Mitchell was completely from African descent, and Paul was African and of white descent. Now, Mitchell Thomas had a very hot temper, and Paul Edward had a very calm personality. Mitchell grew up very poor. He struggled and he fought for everything that he had. And Paul grew up privileged. He was educated, and he was taken care of by both his mother and his father. Okay, so once students completed that activity, I would have them to come up to the front of the classroom. I would have students come up to the front of the classroom and actually present what their findings were. But first, I would go over the activity just to explain to them everything that I would like them to do. And then another thing that I would like to talk about is the standard that I would actually be that this lesson actually follows states that compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in the story or drama, drawings on specific details in the text. So this activity is perfect for this objective because it makes sure because it does compare and contrast the two characters that will be in the story. Okay, and this is, like I said, for 5th grade language arts. Now the focus is on students gaining practice comparing two characters within the same story. They are to look at their similarities, differences, and evaluate how these likeness and differences carried out in their lives. So it's looking at the characters' similarities as well as their differences, and then the decisions that led them, and how these similarities and differences led them to the decisions that they made in their life, and where their life ended up. And this lesson has great importance because it allows students to gain a better understanding of what's going on in the story, and it makes them take a deeper look into the actual character, instead of just looking at the story as instead of just having a general sense of what the story about. It actually allows them to really go in depth about each and every character. Okay. Okay, and so like I said, I will actually go over the activity beforehand, and then I will allow the students to work together, completing the assignment. They will have 15 minutes to do this, and then at the end they would present it. Now, if I did have some students who had some struggles, I would just break the whole class up into groups of at least 2, at the most 4, and so then this way the students will actually be able to bounce ideas off of one another, so that they can, if they did not have a clear understanding of what comparing and contrasting, they will be able to go to their peers for clarification, instead of coming to the teacher or the teacher giving the correct answer. They'll be able to work this out on their own. And then also, I would have students watch a YouTube video, and then this YouTube video is it will actually give a background of Mildred D. Taylor and all of her books in general, and how she came to write this book. Because Mildred D. Taylor is actually the product of Paul Edward Logan. She is, I believe, I want to say, the great granddaughter of him. And so this is actually stories about her actual family, and this is a historical fiction book, but it is based off of her family. So this, like I said, this is a great book. It has a lot of, it gives students a lot of background knowledge as far as how things were back during the slavery, and as well as during the pre-Civil War era. And it also will allow students to maybe even relate to some of the characters in the book, in case they're going through some of the same things, as far as identifying who they are and coming to an understanding of who they are as a person, if they're going through something like that. I think that wraps up my lesson, and thank you for listening. Bye.